In fact, incoming border czar Tom Homan is scheduled to be one of the speakers. President-elect Trump, he will be the final speaker of the day at this convention in Phoenix, Arizona, and you can count on Live Now from Fox to bring you the very latest. This comes as lawmakers have been pushing for 3 bills aimed at cracking down on China's role in the U.S. fentanyl crisis. This is a bipartisan group of lawmakers. They would like to set up a U.S. task force to disrupt narcotics trafficking and pave the way for sanctions on Chinese entities. Now, China is the dominant source of chemical precursors used by Mexican cartels to produce fentanyl, while Chinese money launderers have become key players in the international drug trade. That is according to U.S. authorities. Drug cartels are one of the major concerns as we are talking about border security. To speak more on this, I do want to bring in Nelson Bolito, who is the chair of the Border Commerce and Security Council, as well as the founder of the Energy Council of the Americas. And Nelson, we appreciate you taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks for having me this morning. Thank you.
So, talking about border security, a lot of times people think about it only being between the United States and, let's say, Mexico, but there are so many other factors involved. And also, as I just mentioned, countries. We're talking about China. Can you share with our viewers how all of this works and how it impacts border security?
Great. Well, sure. So you certainly have the Canadian border, which is a much larger border than the Mexican border with the United States, which we know they have also, you've seen increases in illegal entry there, double and triple in some of these areas over the last 4 years. It's not to the level of the southern border, but nevertheless, because of the immigration laws in Canada, which are much more lax, people were flying into Canada and then using that to cross the northern border into the United States. So that was happening. Now, the southern borders, you can imagine, well, you're looking at folks coming in all the way from the Patagonia of South America. But not just that. What's happening is you have flights coming in from China, India, all over Europe, European nations, and they're coming into Mexico City, they're coming into Monterrey, Mexico, basically on a one-way trip to the southern border of the United States, and then making the trek across there. So you have 30, 40, 50,000 that we know of, just Chinese, army-aged individuals alone that literally speak no English, that we've known that many have been stopped. The question is what about the ones that we haven't stopped, right? Which also means other countries. So about 130 plus countries have crossed that we've known on that southern border. Most of it being Central Americans, South Americans. Obviously, Mexicans are a large part of it, but traditionally it hasn't been the case over the last 4, 5, 6 years that Mexico has been the lowest, even though maybe 20%, but it's been mostly Central and South America. Now you look at these countries, what's the incentive? If they don't have to house them, feed them, secure them, educate them, transport them, and they are sent north to the United States, and then they are allowed to send money back home. Just Mexico alone last month had $5.1 billion of remittances back to home country. That means I don't have to do any services to give you, and you're going to send money back to this home country. It is a huge delta of windfall of cash into these countries. So there's no incentive to stop people from leaving, because again, they're going to receive basically free money. And it's not always to buy milk and cookies. We know it's about 38% of those dollars go to pay for human trafficking, fentanyl, drugs, and other types of things, illicit activities. So a large number of that is problematic. Why? Because the United States does not allow or allows anyone to go to any cash counter at a Western Union or a MoneyGram and send money back home cash. So therefore, if you have illegal workers for cash, they can send money back. Now, I would say that I think the Trump administration should put a stop to that by saying, if you want to send money back, we're not going to hold you back, but you need to have a bank account. And in order to have a bank account, you need to have a legal status. So that's going to be a problem. And the idea is if you put these things in place and you make it harder for people to operate in the United States illegally, eventually a lot of these people will head back to their home countries. So it is a big problem, and especially the ones that we don't know how they're here. So 20% of the people that crossed, so if we had 2 million people cross last year, actually about 2.5, about another 20% of that, we don't know anything about. That means they crossed illegally in between the ports of entries. They were never met with an official at the border, and they're in here. That's why you're seeing a lot of these criminal gangs in a lot of these parts all over the United States popping up, doing their thing, and a lot of them are ending up in jail. And like Tom Homan said, those are going to be the first ones that we're going to send back. Issue being is you're saying these countries are like Guatemala, Honduras, Venezuela. They're saying, hey, we're not ready to have these people come back. We're not going to be ready. And, I heard Trump say just yesterday, say, well, the situation is they're going to get ready, and they better be ready because they're coming back. So those are all the issues that we see that are coming down the pike. And then the deportation efforts, I think that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting. And you're going to see a couple million people over the next 4 years being deported.
Let's talk about, you mentioned safety and security being a major issue, but you also mentioned the financial burden. And right now, the United States really carrying the brunt of that. When it comes to other countries, and President-elect Trump, as you mentioned, telling a lot of these countries, you better get ready. Also, taking a very strong stance when it comes to financial punishment with tariffs, talking to Canada, talking to Mexico, talking to China about tariffs, and calling on them to really step up when it comes to addressing the border security on their end. When we talk about working together with other countries, how will that work? And do you think that that's realistic to expect these countries who may have not been doing much now to shift the other way?
Yeah, I do think they're gonna have to get involved with it, or like it or not. I know Mexico's getting ready, has been getting ready. They've been warned, and they've started stepping up. So has Canada. They've also started coming to the table and saying, okay, what else can we do? They've started now requiring more visas to even come to Canada. They're tightening up the immigration process in Canada. So they're working on a lot of number of things. Mexico is going to be a little bit more tricky because that's where a lot of these other cartels are mainly operating out of. Right? There's a lot of control in the political network in the country by cartels, and that basically control what happens. So what's going to happen there is they're going to have to look at ways that we pressure the Mexican government. Tariffs will be one of the sticks, but what we have to do is also work with their military, work with their intelligence sources, and this is let's say a binational effort. Mexico cannot do, it has been proven, cannot do this alone. They need help. The last administration refused help. Hopefully this administration will be amenable to assistance, because if not, there's going to be some serious consequences. Mexico cannot afford a 25% tariff, simply that. But you got to remember, what's also fueling that? That's China. China's influence in Mexico has grown over the last 6 years because of their socialist tending regime that's going left and left year after year over the last now 5 years. That China has moved in. They're putting they're constructing plants. They're constructing. They're getting involved in their financial network. They're getting involved in their commercial network. They want to be suppliers, first, second, third tier supplier to some of our U.S. manufacturers to try to circumvent some of the tariff laws that we have against China directly from the United States. And that stuff, we know about it. We know what's happening. And we're telling Mexico, look, this has to be put a stop to this. And they're doing it. They just recently announced some tariffs on quote unquote textiles, not mentioning China or U.S., but it's really China, because there's a lot of textiles that come in from China into Mexico that really fuels that. But you got to remember the precursors. So what does China want to do? China wants to disrupt the United States any which way they can by killing our youth, and that's what they've been doing over the last 4, 5, 6 years. 100,000 a year on the average. So if they're supplying free, and many times free, precursors to Mexican cartels, the cartels then put them together, make them pills or some other type of transport vehicle, and then they bring them to the United States, and ultimately it kills our children and people in the United States. It causes havoc. That's what China wants to do. That's part of how they're doing and how they're infiltrating in Mexico and unfortunately disrupting the United States. That needs to stop. We know that's happening. That needs to stop, and they need to stop with Mexico. And Trump needs to put those types of stops in place in that country so this doesn't happen anymore.
And you were mentioning, President-elect Trump has mentioned on day one that the deportations will start, and also working to address the illegal drug and the fentanyl crisis. This has been a crisis, though, going on for years. You were mentioning that China and Mexico, they've been building their relationship for a number of years. The border crisis is nothing new. So when we take a look at the measures that President-elect Trump wants to put into place, a lot of our viewers might wonder, how long is it going to take before we finally see some improvements? From your experience and your background, how long might this take to effectively address this crisis?
Well, that's a great question. So day one, Tom Homan, President Trump have said, we're going to start. Well, first of all, it's going to start with the lowest hanging fruit. What is that? There's over 40,000 people in jail already in ICE facilities or ICE beds within county jail houses that are subject to deportation. So you start with the lowest hanging fruit first, because the faster we can get rid of these people, the more we save, because it costs us billions of dollars to house them. Now, we have to negotiate with these other countries. They need to take them back. If they don't take them back, we just got to figure out how do we hit them economically so they take them back anyways. So you're looking at, in day one, it starts slowly, the process forward. It's not instantaneous. It's not overnight. There's camps that need to be built to be able to house some of these people temporarily while they're waiting deportation. The goal is to stop the hemorrhage coming in the United States. That's the first thing. You stop the bleeding. So anyone coming in the United States will be processed, and two things will happen. Either they turn around and they walk back the other way, or two, they go to jail and then we deport them anyways. No more catch and release. That has to stop. The CBP One app, 1,500 people are crossing the border right now, every day, right now, through the CBP One app, through the ports of entries. That needs to stop. Second, the flights with Venezuelans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, Cubans that are coming every day, flights that taxpayers are paying into the United States, that needs to stop. That's another few hundred to 1,000 a day. So, and then the other 1,000 is still crossing in between the ports of entry. You're still getting 4,000 to 5,000 a day. We're just not hearing these things. We're not hearing it because it doesn't hit the southern border numbers. Only thing that hits is the illegal number. So they say, well, migration's gone down. Yeah, the ones that are encountered in between the ports of entries have gone down. They're not counting the flights. They're not counting CBP One app. These are things that are still happening. These are things that need to stop. You stop that first, then you take care of the people here. And what's happening? You got to remember, we let these people in. The bar is so low for asylum, so low. People who come to the country say, I seek asylum, I have credible fear. We give them asylum. You got to remember, some of these people don't see a court judge for 3, 4, 5, up to 7 years. We give them temporary visas. We give them a telephone. We give them a stipend. We give them all kinds of help while they're here because the United States, believe that they really have credible fear. Well, 89% of them never show up in court. So what happens? That tells us simply that 89% of the people lied to get into the United States. They don't have credible fear. They don't show up in court because they can't prove that the credible fear that they said they had. So why show up? Because if I show up, they're going to arrest me right there and deport me. So they get lost in America. At that point, they lose their visa. They lose all their privilege, any privileges they may have, anything like that. Now they are illegal in the United States and subject for deportation. And those are the people that are going to start falling into the cracks. And there's millions a year that are going to have that happen. Because remember, we've been allowing 2.5 to 3 million people a year into this country with this visa program, this temporary visa program that start expiring when they don't show up. There's going to be a lot of people out there. We need to make it very difficult for them to get a job, very difficult for them to send money back home. And we need to make it difficult for them to basically obtain any type of living or otherwise location, because the idea is if we make it difficult, they will self-deport. So I think a lot of this this deportation that Trump's thinking about is not just the roundups. It's not just the people getting put in these camps. A lot of these folks were hoping that, will say, look, wasn't a good idea like we thought it was. We're going to go back home and we're going to be productive citizens back where in our country of origin.
It is a very complex problem, Nelson, one that will take likely years to effectively fix, as this has been a crisis that has been building for so long. We appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox to talk about it.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.